Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Social Hotelier podcast with me, Sam-Erik. My guest today is Jaze Bordeaux. He's an award-winning Canadian filmmaker, known for bold, thought-provoking stories like EFC, Genesis, and Monopoly. His storytelling crafts offers powerful lessons for hospitality leaders on creating authentic, unforgettable guest experiences. Stay tuned. This conversation could change how you see your property's story. Welcome, Jaze, and thanks for joining me today.
Thank you for having me. I was looking forward to joining you today. I've been checking out a lot of the episodes, and I'm like, wow, there's a lot of neat tips here, and places to discover, and it's a very different format for me as well. So I was quite excited to hop on here today with you. Right?
Great. So, just to get started, for our audience to get some background, can you tell me about your professional experience and why you got into filmmaking?
This year I've had the opportunity or privilege to talk to a lot of people, and it really allowed me to think back. I think in my life, just sometimes we don't stop to think about how we got to where we are. And I always thought there were two inception moments, which I'll talk about in just a moment. But I started to realize that the storyteller has always been there in me. I started remembering elementary school writing short stories, entering short story contests, right? In my adult life, I started in the world of finance, corporate finance, investment banking, and that sector is largely almost all storytelling. We would talk to companies and say, "What is your story?" And we'd have to help them craft their story. Obviously, they're selling something to the public, which is their mission, their goal, their company, their objective, and it was all like storytelling. And slowly, if you look at life, it's all storytelling, right? We talk to people, we want to know their story. How did they get to where they are, and so forth and so forth. But for me, when I pivoted into the film world, I think there was two defining moments for me as a producer, and I'm also a director. And essentially, as an executive producer, you're overseeing things from concept to finish. So that's the business side of filmmaking, and that involves everything that any startup company would be doing, from financing to marketing to how to get the product to the market, and the total business aspect of it. So that's one hat I wear, and then director hat is very much the creative hat when you're actually making the product. Uh, for me, my decision to walk into the role of a producer just came by virtue of I saw an opportunity back in 2010 where the future was very evident. It was going to be streaming, and you'd have these giants like Amazon and Netflix and Google all fighting each other for content. So it was very clear the future would be IP stories that you can sell to all of these different platforms that are absolutely in need, and they still are, of content, maybe more so than ever before. And so I kind of started that journey at that point around 2010 as a producer. But my inception point as a director, even though I knew back then I would be directing, and I did everything I needed to do to prepare to get to that point, including the acting training, understanding how to direct, and doing all of those things. So I knew I would be doing it, but I would say the inception moment, the moment where you go from um, knowing you're going to do something to this is what I'm doing, where it's very definitive and it's clear and there is no uncertainty around it, I think came probably in 2014. I had a dear friend of mine took me to see one of my favorite films. I think you could see one of the posters behind me. it says Interstellar there. And she was very excited at that time to take me to see this movie. I couldn't understand why. I mean, I would have seen it anyways. It's Christopher Nolan's film, and I do follow his work. But she was very adamant that I only go with her, and we got to the end of the film, and she looked at me and she said, "The reason I wanted you to see this is because that's the level I see you at." And boom, it was that inception moment where it was, the difference between knowing the path and walking the path. It was very definitive for me. So my inception point happened kind of at two different moments, and then from there, the plan had always been is we were building towards a film slate, and that film slate would contain 6 to 10 different sci-fi thrillers. But before we got there, there was a few projects we were doing along the way. So most recently, we came out with EFC. Last year, it was released. We were very honored. It did very well internationally, picked up many, many awards. It's currently in distribution, so it is released in the US or in North America, the UK, Spain, Mexico, a few other territories right now. It's still being rolled out internationally all over the world. And in 2026, we're releasing another film called Let Go, which was shot in 12 different countries across Europe. It's a psychological thriller. Really excited about that. Maybe we can get into that a little bit later. And then from there, we're working on this slate of movies that we're working on for the next 10 years of sci fi thrillers. Uh, you know,
Wow. And
and
that's it's quite exciting that you already have planned the future quite a bit ahead, what you're going to do, and also have a very clear idea. Is that do you work with a team to develop this, or is it something that you're having sleepless nights on this? Or how does it work?
we have a small team, a small producing team. There's about 5 of us, I would say, that we're working on. Yeah, long days, long nights. We've been working on it for a while, and but yeah, we work together to bring this from concept to actual fruition, right? And I know the film industry, people can look at it as a very creative thing, but it is a business.
Yeah.
And just like any other business, there's a lot of strategy involved, long term planning. There's a lot of things to take into consideration: markets, distribution, financials. You can look at it like any other startup company, except that you're constantly doing it over and over again. So
Okay.
um, you go from one production to the other. It's almost like one startup to the other. So when we do a film slate, it's just like a one-time kind of project that just keeps going on and on consistently, like I said, for the next 10 to 12 years. So
Okay. You have created these. You mentioned the award-winning films that transport audience into entirely different worlds, and I happened I see that your which relating to the boxing, and and it was sort of it was a very exciting thriller for me also to watch, and I never met the filmmaker who and I have seen his movie. So you are the sort of first. So it was a because I love to going to movies, and it's something that really I'm so focused and excited when I see a movie. I almost in the story myself. So uh, I'm just because I'm coming from a hospitality background, and hospitality we also aim to transport guests into memorable experiences. So when you develop a film idea, like the ideas you talk about, maybe I have read about you're doing, have done something like Genesis or Monopoly. How do you keep that story compelling from concept to completion? How might hoteliers use that same discipline when they're crafting their brand story? If you can give a little bit of a spin to this, how it would inspire hoteliers.
in so when I'm writing stories, essentially there are two why questions I ask, and this has definitely helped me as just a story writer or a script writer. It's helped my growth by asking these two questions. Now, the first question um, that I would ask for any story is, why this story now? Why are we going to tell this story now? In other words, why would it be important to tell right now? If I can't answer that question, I'm probably not going to move forward with that story. And it would be the same with brands. But the second question is by far the most important question, because it's the question that I asked not only in the writing stage, the pre production stage, the post production, but and even writing, you write a scene. The question I ask is, why should people care? Why would they care about this scene? Why would they care about this character? We get to the end of Act One. Why would they care about this act? Why do they care about Act Two? That one question, why should people care, I found is probably the most important question I could ask myself, or anybody really, in writing a story. It doesn't matter if it's a script for screen or just a story around uh, the brand, right? Because essentially, if you look at any particular film, let's take Interstellar for example. I'm using it because it's a film that a lot of people probably have seen, right? And if you, let's say, look at the concept for just a moment, there is this big idea where, okay, the Earth is dying. Okay, now we need to get on a spaceship, fly through some kind of wormhole, find another planet to move or restart humanity. Okay, it's a big idea, right? But why should people care about it?
Yeah.
Um, Realistically, if you just saw that on screen, it would just be maybe entertaining, depending upon how it was created. But the filmmaker, Christopher Nolan, what he does is to make you care about it. There is this what you call an emotional anchor, and this would be true for any story. And in that particular story, that emotional anchor in that journey is basically, you have a father who made a promise to his daughter, and he says, "I'm coming back." And it's something that people can relate to, because here you have a father who's leaving to try to save humanity, and his daughter's at home crying, thinking she's never going to see him again. And he makes this promise that he's going to be back, and she's like holding him to it. But then it's like, can he really fulfill this promise? And it's something people can relate to, from a parental side, just from an emotional standpoint, right? So now all of a sudden in this story, the stakes and the urgency, all of a sudden, just from that little emotional anchor, just went to a whole new level, right?
Yeah.
So they may not care about the big idea of, oh, okay, you're on a spaceship going through a wormhole to find a new planet to create a breakout civilization, right? But they will care about, oh my God, is he going to make it back to her? So we call that an emotional anchor. So in crafting a brand story, it's almost the same thing, because you'll have this plot, and it could be luxury. That's the big idea. That's the big story. And okay, great. Uh, but you still need that like emotional like anchor to it, right? The plushness and all of that, and the niceness when you go into the place is great, but I equate that with the big idea. It's that when you're crafting that story, if you could find that one emotional anchor, um, that someone can relate to, that kind of makes the difference in that story, right? And it could be so simple. It could be something like, I mean, I could have a hotel here in Toronto, and you have a guest coming in from Japan, and all of a sudden we're greeting them in Japanese, and they're really like, "Oh my God, I can't believe he just said konnichiwa to me, and you're greeting me in my language." And it's just a little something they can like relate to, that just sets the story apart, because again, the big idea is the big idea, right?
Yeah.
But the emotional anchors, that's what really like tethers people to that story, right? And makes them connect and sit there. Wow, what's next? What's next? What's next? Right?
Yeah. Yeah, we talk about this in are you my favorite kind of expression, or maybe a one-liner, because people ask me what's the difference between luxury and premium, because they talk about the different category of hotels, and well, usually I say that the premium hotel are usually they are the large brands who are looking to fill the rooms, you know, the number of rooms, how many rooms can they fill? That's what matters to them most. But when it comes to luxury, it's about moving the hearts, meaning that emotional connection they can make with every single guest that matters to them most. And it doesn't matter on the size of the hotel. It's more about that the memory and the feeling that the guest will have during their stay. And if they don't remember anything else about the hotel, it was just how they were treated. So that's something I can relate to, how you talk about that. Why should they care?
Yeah, and it's such a simple element, right? And but it makes the world of a difference. And I see it all the time with just friends I have. Um, they can go to maybe one of the worst places, but they leave feeling like they were king of the world there, and
Yeah.
they just want to go back for that because they just have this. They just remember feeling so good at this place and being treated so well. So yeah, it's we call it an emotional anchor. If you
Yeah.
tie that into the story, it makes all the difference, right?
Yeah, I'll give you a small example of what happened to me last week. I went to Croatia on to look at the hotel site and as a business opportunity, and we were walking quite a bit. It's in a beautiful area of Croatia, and we had to walk quite a bit, so the terrain would not be that easy to walk. But my host took the trouble of uh, cutting a branch from a tree and making a walking stick for me. And I still remember that he told about this. I said, well, this is too big of a stick. It was really helpful for me when I was walking in the terrain. And before we were leaving, I said, well, unfortunately, I'm not able to bring that with me. Well, then we just discussed, well, it looks like I'm going to come back because I will use that stick in the future whenever I visit him, or whether it's going to be for a business purpose or for a personal reason. So it left me that I felt I was very well taken care of. And if I remember only one thing about my trip was that walking stick that he just he cut the branch with this little small Swiss knife that had a little bit of a saw and smoothen out a little bit of the branches, and then hand it to me that this is yours. That's nice.
And then that's it, and you'll remember that for life.
Yep, that's exactly. So those are those. So that's why I mean this is really tying into everything you are talking about. But maybe we can talk a little bit about the common complex concepts or relatable experiences. In the sci-fi thrillers that you've been making, you explore a world without original thoughts. That's an abstract, high-concept idea. How do you make it relatable and emotional? Many hotels try to sell abstract. Many hotels try to sell values like sustainability or well-being, which can feel abstract to people and the guests, or they maybe have some idea. But what techniques can we borrow from your approach to make these values to come alive for visitors?
One part of so I'll tell you this. I've probably written myself over 15 years, maybe 10 different screenplays, and I may have read maybe 5 times as much. And part of my growth is to understand how to do exactly what you just described. So when you have a movie like Genesis and it revolves around original thought theory, so it's placed in a world where original thoughts are essentially it's a thought economy, right? They're monetized. It's very abstract because you can look at it like it's a very thinker's type of a movie, but I'm going to tell you it's the most emotional story I have ever written, and it could be the most emotional script I have actually read. And so solving that was one of the big challenges with Genesis, because in the first few drafts of the story, it was very abstract. I felt like it was kind of void of that emotion that you're talking about, right? But essentially, just to kind of also go back a little bit to what we were just talking about, even though the story revolves around thought theory, which is a very abstract concept, the emotional core, it's very much like a family story, right? It's the story itself is grounded deep in like relationships, memories, like vulnerability. Now, this kind of piggybacks off of what we were just like talking about, right? We were talking about taking big ideas and like anchoring them to like some type of a um, what would you call it? Like an emotional truth, so to speak, right? And the perfect example I could probably give you is this: if we go back to what we were just talking about, you could take something else, like sustainability. I know is a very big thing for brands right now, and a lot of hotels they talk about it, right? But how do you anchor that to like an emotional truth? So my wife and I, 5 years ago, we were in Italy, and we were in a very nice region, the Puglia region, and we stayed at a very nice little uh, I wouldn't call it a hotel. I wouldn't even call it a motel either. Something maybe in the middle. Very family oriented place. And one thing, it's 5 years later, and it still sticks out to me. I remember the first or second day we walked out, and on the side we saw all the linen. They were doing the laundry, but all of the linen was hung out to dry. It wasn't going through like a dryer, right? Obviously, in North America, it's you're hard pressed to find anybody putting anything out to dry in the sun. Everything's going through a washer or dryer or commercial grade dryer or something like that, where they send it out to be serviced. But this was unique because I remember we walked by, and I still remember it because the sun was shining. It was just beaming down. There were these white sheets hanging there, and like you could see the light just bouncing off the white sheets. And it was like, oh wow, okay, they're sun drying this now. I don't know, but when we got back, obviously all the linen was changed, and it was like it felt different, right? It's like almost like the energy of the sun and the warmth and the bounce, and it like maybe it was all in our mind, and there was no difference between the linen being sun dried or going through a machine. Maybe it was all in our mind, but we sure felt like it was, one of the greatest things that we had ever experienced, with these sun dried kind of sheets with,
Yeah.
bouncing and feeling cozy and stuff like that. So, going back to what you were asking me, we still piggyback off kind of the same theme that we were talking about earlier. You could take something else like sustainability, which could feel so abstract, but yet something like what I just mentioned, the linen being sun dried, um, was such a personal, emotional core for us that all of a sudden you took something that was very abstract and made it something you could connect to, right? And maybe me just maybe telling that story of the sun dried linen um, may connect to more people than just saying, well, our hotel is practicing all these sustainability um, or all these areas of sustainability, and it's just this large, big idea that a lot of people maybe don't grasp right away, right? Or maybe they'll be like, well, or question it or challenge it or whatever they might do. But that core, that experience, that it's what changes the whole game, right?
Yeah, yeah, that's a very good point. I mean, I had opportunity to stay in a number of hotels, and we went to a place in in France, which is a what we call an eco resort, and their menu is very interesting. That I mean, people are used to having fresh squeezed orange juice or grapefruit juice with their breakfast, but this hotel has a very clear idea about their approach to sustainability. Is that they only use fruits or berries or whatever grows within a radius of 150 kilometers. And definitely in that part of France, there's no oranges growing, so that means you don't have any orange juice either. And they will not serve any uh, concentrate and so on. But it tells a very kind of a clear story and also idea of what is the sustainability, and also how their approach is about sustainability, supporting the local community. They buy what's grown there, and there's other options than oranges that you can have with your breakfast, and this is their approach to this. And I've found that quite interesting, because there are very few hotels I see that they are saying, well, this is what we have, because it's we have a very clear idea how we see what we can offer in a way that is actually sustainable for the community and also in general.
And that in and of itself is amazing, because obviously food is an easy way to do it, especially
Yeah,
how many times maybe have you heard from people, the mangoes I had from this hotel in this country, oh my god, it was amazing, I can't
yeah,
find them anywhere like this, right?
yeah,
They're literally picking them off the trees and off the resort or whatever it was. I think I'm trying to remember exactly. There was a hotel we went to in Italy. I'm trying to remember where. I remember they grew their own. They had their own lemon trees,
oh
and
yes,
so they would just use their own lemons for various things, limoncello, this, that, whatever it was, and
yeah,
people thought it was just like, oh my god, it was just this amazing experience. And I was even listening to some of your podcasts, and I caught that. I think one of your guests was at the Apple Beach Hotel in Colombia.
yes,
I think was I heard that, and I said, you know what? I'm going to this place. I'm going to go visit this place when we head down to Colombia, just by virtue of the fact, right? Because it is a different type of experience too, that I mean I've personally seen as well, and again, and we love Italy for this, because you can go anywhere and it's literally it doesn't matter if it's the fish coming out from the local like sea, or if it's the the oranges growing off the tree, but yeah, the that experience is priceless. And I find with food, I guess us as humans, we connect so deeply with food that it's one of the richest experiences I think we could have or even connect to, right?
yeah, yeah. Okay, we'll move on. We will forward a little bit now about you have imagined physical spaces like starships as living characters. So, if a hotel was the main character of film, what would you look for to give it a distinctive voice? How can hoteliers design spaces that feel like they have their own personality and a story arc?
I think this is such a wonderful opportunity for many brands to take advantage of that they don't necessarily take advantage of. And recently, as an adult, I had made a decision that I wanted to go back and start watching. I wanted to understand what I was watching between the ages of like 5 and 12 years old. So I was going back and looking at the programs that I watched, and one of them was Star Trek. And I was really impressed with Star Trek because I feel like they did a great job envisioning the world that we would live in and that we are living in today. And maybe perhaps they helped to shape that, just with concepts and imagery and stuff like that. But you saw everything. Like you could see tablets, you could see AI devices, even what they called their holodeck program. We have it, which is these virtual reality games. I was literally Disney has something called the Void, and I was literally in Star Wars. Just like they would be in their holodeck programs on Star Trek. And I asked myself, if I had to go back in time when they were writing this, I feel like they did everything perfect for their time as best as they could do it. But there was one thing I would change, and there's one thing I'd whisper into their ear, and it's that they have this ship, and they're constantly saying, "Computer, I need coordinates for whatever place," or "Computer, we need tactical battle plans for something," right? And I feel like they missed out on that one little thing where all of a sudden that computer should have been a character in the story. And it's very much like I have my iPhone, and essentially Siri is a character now in my story of life, right?
Yeah.
And I feel like there was a golden opportunity there to create a character from that AI. So I actually thought about it. I went so deep to think about it, and I said, and I'm saying this for a reason. All right, well, if I was in the writing room back then, how do you name this? So I started thinking about it. So what do you look for? Okay, well, you got to find like a distinctive type of a voice. What does this thing do? It was very strategic. It gave them a lot of tactical battle plans. It almost did everything except like counseling, right? Oh, correction. One of the other series actually did do that. And so I started looking up, and I'm putting characteristics of this, right? Tactical strategies, all the things that they would use the computer for. And ultimately, I'm doing my Google searches and what name matches these descriptions, and I'm coming up with Athena, and it says, the goddess Athena, the Greek goddess, kind of balanced out strategy and protection and all these things. So I would envision now Star Trek, Next Generation, Captain Picard calling, instead of saying computer Athena, we need tactical strategy for, and just that one little twist, all of a sudden, if they just kept everything the same, you have a major character in this story now, right?
Yeah.
And I feel like with hotels, uh, it's incredible because it's a space where there's so many people coming through. There's so many stories that are being told. Every hotel, even if it's a franchise hotel, um, has something slightly distinct about it. And I feel as though if you can literally make that a character, like part of the crew, the cast of employees that are there, um, it's really easy, for example, for people to remember and talk about it. Here we are on this podcast. And I'll give you a perfect example. The HBO show White Lotus came out, and I didn't catch the first two seasons, but I saw the last season. They filmed it in Thailand at I know it was a Four Seasons hotel. I
Yeah.
will
It's
forever
Samui
call
Island.
that. Okay, I will forever call that hotel the White Lotus.
Yeah.
And I feel as though anyone who's seen it, which it's a very popular show, so a lot of people have seen it, will probably call it the White Lotus,
Yep.
when they go to Thailand. And so I know that's a little unusual because that was featured on a very big TV production, and not every hotel is going to be featured like that. but I do feel as though every hotel has something slightly different or distinct about it. And if you could look at the characteristics of it, you could almost reverse engineer and work your way backwards towards what the name would be, right?
Yeah.
Or the personality. Just like what I was explaining, I did with the Star Trek computer. We just kind of worked backwards and came up with Athena. And
Yes, good.
every time I see an episode, I imagine, Captain Picard saying, Athena, we need this, we need that. Uh, and for hotels, again, it's great because if you're thinking, it could be anything. The Four Seasons. I will forever refer to that Four Seasons as the White Lotus, right?
Yeah.
Very
But
distinct in the
that,
sense that, yeah,
but what happens is that many, I think you can see that in what I call the independent hotels that are not part of a hotel chain. They tend to have, I mean, okay, it could be some, maybe a landmark of a location where they are, or they may have a very distinct uh, trees or something that people can relate to. So they are, I think they're onto something, particularly in the independent hotels. But I think because of the brands like Hilton and Four Seasons and Ritz Carlton, they are a little bit kind of generic names. So I think in that sense, I would also call the Koh Samui Four Seasons a White Lotus, or even the one in Sicily White Lotus, because that was a great hotel and great story that happened during that particular season. But yeah, let's talk
yeah,
about authenticity versus commercial polish, because that is that you find both particularly in hotel world, you feel that, and hotels sometimes fear that being too real won't market well. From your perspective, how do you capture authenticity without losing the storytelling impact, and how could hoteliers do the same?
this is interesting because in the era that we're in right now, and everybody's talking about AI and achieving a level of perfection, right? And I feel like, especially in film, I feel like one of the things people are not talking about is essentially what actually makes a good film. And almost every time, I feel as though it comes back to all the mistakes that were made, all the imperfect scenes, all the screw ups in between. Sometimes the best lines actually come from a mistake, you know? And there's something that happens when all of that is going on. So, in the filmmaking part, I personally have learned to just embrace the mistakes, because sometimes there's this intangible energy that gets birthed into the film. And sometimes you could see a film that's not perfect at all. It's made every mistake in a book, but they embraced it to such a point where it's still wildly successful, right? And I feel like with film, with all the talk with AI and making things so perfect and polished, I feel like people are forgetting that, or they're going to realize soon enough. And again, there's a lot of great things happening with AI, and I'm all for it. And I think there's great tools developing, and it will just help the process. But I just feel like people forget, or they will realize soon, that mm, it's good, but it doesn't feel, as he said, authentic. It's like it's weird, right? It's almost too good, because the films they're going to connect to are the films that aren't actually perfect, because the mistakes are a
Correct.
part of it, and that's where you get that real authentic kind of feel, and that you could like connect to it. You know what I mean? And I think
Yeah,
we've all
exactly.
seen these types of films where sometimes you can see a movie that's been so perfectly done, and you leave and it's forgettable. You don't
Yeah.
even remember it years later. Oh yeah, I remember seeing that film. And then you have a film like, I might as well say it, I was just thinking about it. There was a movie out called The Room. I think it came out like 40 years ago, and it plays still in like all these midnight screenings around the world, and it has like this massive cult following. They wrote a book about the making of this film because it was such a crazy situation, and then they actually made that book into another film about the making of that film, which they called The Disaster Artist, which is a good description of the original film called The Room. But if you look at the making of it, and anybody here listening to this now, just you could go on YouTube and just type in the making of The Room. You'll see all these clips about the making of the film, and it's almost unbelievable how disastrous the entire thing was. Um, but and some people might call it a bad film, but it's wildly successful 40 years later because it's still screening all over the world at midnight screenings. It has a huge following. The book sold well. They remade the book into a film with James Franco. It won a ton of awards. And all these years later, they're still making money from it. This very imperfect disaster of a film, because when you're watching it, you could feel how authentic the filmmakers were trying to make something real, but
Yeah.
everything they were doing actually was a total disaster, right? But you could feel they were really trying, right? And they tried to do something really, really, really good. And, the energy came across like that, and they still ended up being wildly successful for it. So I find sometimes you just gotta embrace it.
Hmm.
Even when we were filming EFC, we had a lot of challenges like filming these fight scenes, right? In these cages because we were challenged with weather. We had our studio system going down. We had the worst snow in history in Canada. There was so many challenges. I think the way we had envisioned, I don't think, I'm telling you for a fact, the way we were supposed to shoot the scenes was not how we ended up shooting the scenes. Um, we didn't have like everything we needed to finish building the set. So what we did is we just had to embrace it as it was, a
Yep.
very gritty kind of a look. Uh, we went with it, and it was received very well because it matches the story even better than we could have made it work. And the feedback we get from people, they say it's gritty and it feels real and it feels very authentic, and I feel like I'm in the middle of the cage with these women, right?
Yep. I
uh,
felt exactly the
so
same. Yeah.
yeah, and so we just embraced that, and just leaned into it. So
Yep.
sometimes, you know um, there are properties, maybe they're in a little village and they want to project that they could be a hotel in Manhattan or something like that, and I don't know if that works, but I feel like if you just kind of lean into maybe the thing you're trying to avoid, you might have better results from that, right? And so it's just kind of leaning into it and not avoiding it.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
that's where the magic kind of happens, right? And typically we tend to avoid it because it's like, oh no, we can't like project this, or we can't film this. It's not going to look a certain way, and TikTok, I think, almost became what it was because people were doing these videos that looked raw but were very authentic.
Yep.
And
Exactly.
there was a little bit of people said, well, Instagram's a very polished thing, and I like TikTok because it feels more authentic, right? And
Yep.
it's more raw and it's a little bit
Right.
gritty,
Right.
and it wasn't like perfect. And people just kind of leaned into it and focused on whatever their message was or whatever story they were trying to tell. So I think there's huge opportunities when we can lean into, and everybody has something there that's not perfect. And
Yep.
sometimes that's the key. Whatever that
Very.
is sometimes the very thing that creates that intangible feel, that magic element that we don't know how to create. It just kind of like gets birthed, you know.
Yeah,
When I look at
very good.
what we did in EFC with those fight scenes, I could feel the intangible energy there. It just got birthed when we embraced it. Like there was no
Yeah,
way to. I feel like if we did it how we were going to do it, where it was a little bit more polished, it may not have come across the same way, right? But we had
yeah,
the challenges. We knew it wasn't going to be perfect, so we just leaned into it. We went for
that's
it.
good. I will talk a little bit about the casting the right people. You work closely with actors to embody characters. In hospitality, the staff are our cast members. How can hoteliers coach and empower their teams to play their role in telling the property story consistently, and maybe have some lessons learned from the way you are working with actors for in your films?
This could be probably the most important thing I think we talk about today in terms of that. And I feel as though a lot of that needs to start. Uh, I understand everybody has like an HR departments and they have certain boxes they want to check and they go through certain processes and stuff like that. But with film, the advantage we have is that when you're casting for a character, for example, I already know who the character is. I've got the character story. I know their backstory. I know what they're doing in the script. I know where they end up in the script. And I know who the character actually is, right? So, what we're doing is we're casting for an actor to come in and breathe life into the character. And I feel like when it comes to employees, um, you almost, if I had to put myself, for example, in a hotel HR department, I probably would not think like an HR department, right? I would probably think very much like a director. And with a hotel, I would be thinking, okay, we've built a story for this property, right? Or the hotel. The hotel has a story. Now, um, part of that story is more than likely there's an ensemble cast, right? Think of Avengers. You know, Avengers has a whole ensemble cast that's telling this, this one story in this universe that they actually live in, right? So I would look at it something like that. So sometimes um, you could look at the front desk host and call them the captain, like Captain America, right? And their superpower is they, what's Captain America's superpower in his film? He pretty much inspires trust. He has integrity. People look up to the character. It kind of sets the tone, the moral compass, so to speak, right? And obviously, that person's the first face that people see when they come. So if that's a character, right? Um, I probably personally may not even look more so at the resume. I would look, can this person be this character that we need them to be in this story, right? And there's a whole ensemble cast like that. And we were talking earlier, and I said to you, just in preparing for the episode today, um, I was thinking about that, and then I started writing like a story around it, right? And that's kind of where I kind of came up with, a lot of things. So, and I thought about the hotels, and I'm like, so, okay, if I stick with this ensemble Avengers kind of cast, right? Because you could look at your story like that. Okay, obviously the guest is the main protagonist, and everybody else is the supporting character. But who else is there, right? There's always the concierge, and I equated that to like a Doctor Strange, because that person would know every hidden secret shortcut in the city. They can conjure stuff last minute, whatever it is, a dinner reservation or something. And then I'm like, of course, okay, big thing at these properties. Who's the chef? That would probably be Iron Man, right? Just because of the showmanship, the creative genius, and they could design and create these dishes people will leave and always talk about forever. They'll never stop talking about whatever that was. And so, from that standpoint, I mean, if I'm a hotel and you're crafting the story, the reason why I said this could be the most important thing that we talk about is because essentially, the story of the hotel is going to be driven by these characters, right? Or this ensemble kind of cast, right? So that becomes like everything right now.
Yes.
So who do you get to play these characters? And sometimes, like a TV series, you could have an actor playing a character, and then the actor is not back the next season, but the character is still there. It's just replaced by another actor, right? And I think sometimes in telling these stories, and well, first of all, if you have a team and they know what the story is, of the place, and they can commit to that story, and they know that they're also playing a role in the story, this is their character, right? I feel as though it's something they can have a lot of fun with, and it's a little bit more of a guiding factor in what they would do than having a checklist of, you know, to do stuff.
Yeah.
Checklist, check that off, check that off. It's like, oh no, I'm playing this character. I'm supposed to be, the Captain America here, of the Avengers, of this ensemble team that we've put together, right? And and that's kind of what it is. So from that standpoint, I think it's the single most important element that any hotel um, could factor into what they're doing. And
Very
if
good.
if you could, and obviously that would have to happen before. It could happen after, but largely once you've written your story and you've written these characters in there, it's a lot easier to cast for these characters, right? Versus
Yes.
kind of after the fact, it's like, okay, well, we hired you for this. We know we gave you a checklist, and these are kind of your responsibilities. But in our story, we really wanted this, right? So if I'm in that position, with some of the hotels, and you've taken the time and you've written a story around your brand, a story that people can connect to, and obviously it's going to be a very character driven story. So the next thing is to craft a story around these characters, right?
Yeah.
And yeah.
Very good. I would just like to jump forward a little bit about recognition versus guest delight. Delight. You won multiple directing and producing awards, but I imagine audience response still matters most. Hotel face a similar tension between industry awards and guest satisfaction. How do you balance the two in your work, and what can hoteliers learn from that balance?
It is a good question, and I mean, obviously, from a business standpoint, the audience response is the most important every time, unemphatically. Um, these are the people paying for your product one way or the other, whether they're staying at a hotel or they're buying a movie ticket or whatever they're doing. The audience response is king. One of my personal things that I actually like to do in real life is I love going to theaters. And I'll give you an example. The movie I mentioned earlier, Interstellar, I went to go see it probably 21, 24 times in a theater. But when I went to go to the theater, the majority of that time, it wasn't to watch the movie. I wanted to watch the audience watching the movie. I wanted to see how they were reacting to certain scenes, and um, the reaction I saw was so amazing. I kept going back because I'm like, okay, I'm gonna watch a different set of people watching this film now, and it was always like nail biting. I mean, I know it's kind of a term that's used out there, but literally, people are on the edge of their seats. They're literally they're nervous about the scenes and things going on, and I would take an audience reaction like that to any film I have over any awards. Very appreciative of any honors, obviously, that organizations will give us, but the audience reaction is by it's not really something to if we talk about, okay, we're going to do a film just for awards. No, we're making this film for an audience, and we want them to come out of it either entertained, um, or challenged or different than they were when they went in, because essentially at the end of the day it is a business, and that audience is paying for a product, so you want them to be happy for it because they can come back for it. And this is why, for example, I'll stay on the same trail there. I talked about Interstellar, going and watching the audience nail biting, and being so in anticipation and loving the film. I don't believe Christopher Nolan won Best Picture for that. I'm sure. I think the film obviously won a lot of awards, maybe for visual effects and sound and various things, but he didn't. I don't believe he got an Oscar for Best Picture or any of that. However, he just announced. Well, he has a new film coming out next year. They put the tickets on sale 1 year early for a movie and sold out all the
Wow.
IMAX theaters around the world. And why is that? The audience went to see films he had before. They loved what he did. They don't need to know anything about what he's doing next. The fact that he's doing it, they're willing to pay money a year in advance to make sure they see it uh, immediately the way he wants to see it. So that's what goes back to the business. You can't discount it because um, if it's not for that, then you don't have longevity, right?
Right.
You may have short term success, but you won't have longevity for the most part. And so we definitely prioritize the audience experience, trying to focus on telling good stories. And I think any organization or business should focus solely on that because that would speak volumes over and above any awards that are given, right?
Yeah. Well, Jace, this has been a very interesting conversation, and you've been giving us so much to think about in terms of turning hospitality into living, breathing stories. But before we close this episode, and I hope to bring you back another time to look at some other angles, is there one piece of storytelling advice you could give to a hotelier who wants to stand out in an overcrowded market?
It's really simple. It's very, very simple, and it doesn't get more complicated than this. If you're going to tell a story, yes, stories evolve. You just have to commit to whatever that story is because there's something new going on all the time. And sometimes I see companies in general, corporate companies, trying to adapt their story to match a new trend, right? And that's when it doesn't feel authentic anymore, and you could tell, you start to just to lose people like that. But if you've developed and built the story, and obviously if I had to add one thing, the characters are very important, the ensemble cast is very important in the story of the hotel. Stick to the story. Things happen, things change, but just stick to the story because there's always an audience for it. but sometimes you lose the confidence when you're jumping around with stories too often, right? Yeah, so if I had to leave one thing, I'd say commit to the story.
Very good. So lastly, if people are interested to find out more about your work, or how can they do so? How can they connect with you if they want to reach out to you through any of the channels where you're present?
Very easy. You can find me online at jazbordeaux.com, and on my website, you can find all my social media links. Although on social media, you can also find me at Jaze Bordeaux. You can find links to everything going on my website, email, contact. So I would recommend just to go visit the website at, again, jazbordeaux.com.
I'll make sure that I put that into the description of our episode. So, Jace, thank you very much. I appreciate that you joined today, and this was a fantastic episode. You're the first filmmaker I have as a guest, and I learned so much during this conversation. So, thanks again for your time.
Well, thank you for having me. It was a pleasure to be on. This was, as I said, I was looking forward to this for a long time because just because of the whole concept of it, and even discovering your show. I'm finding little what I call it. I'm finding things that I may not have otherwise found just normally out there, right? So I appreciate that very much, right?
Thanks for joining us this week on The Social Hotelier Show. Make sure to visit our website, The Social Hotelier Show, blueberry.net, where you can subscribe to the show in Apple Podcast, Spotify, Google Play, or via RSS, so you never miss a show. While you're at it, if you found value in this show, we appreciate a rating in Apple Podcast. Or if you simply tell a friend about the show, that will help us out too. Be sure to tune in for our next episode.